Why, hello there, Mary Rose. It's interesting. This right here is the first book that I've ever read. Actually, I haven't finished reading it yet, but I will. Written by a psychic that is, written by a psychic. Because for one thing, raised with Christian dogma and stuff, we're told that, that comes from the powers of darkness, whatever. But I know I was supposed to read it, and I don't have any... I'm not going to go by some ancient text to tell me that what you do is somehow evil, because I don't believe that at all, okay? Anyhow, the reason I found the book is interesting, because there's one of the souls of the deceased that often visits me in dreams and interlocutions and coincidence. Her name's Eleanor Rose, and Miss Rose was contacting me with a lot of other things that are synchronized with this, and I woke up, and I saw your name, Mary Rose. Well, Rose is also one of the symbols for the Virgin Mary. That's why it's called the Rosary, and she's called Rosa Mystica, the mystical rose. Anyhow, so I woke up in the morning to this loud singing. This was August 6th, Feast of Hiroshima, and it was interesting. More coincidences. I had this music in my ears that day about the Japanese music from the game Axis and Allies, and I thought to myself, maybe I should look up. I think Hiroshima happened today. Sure enough, I Google it, and it did, and I didn't know Hiroshima was August 6th. I just knew the Japanese music from Axis and Allies meant that there was something important in World War II, and the Japanese souls were trying to get my attention. But I also heard this song from The Sound of Music. And up in the nursery there's an absurd little bird that's popping up to say cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. And then as soon as I grabbed your book, Mary Rose, that was what caught my attention. I opened right up to the dove, and your book's called The Sign of the Dove. And the dove kept cuckooing in a way that was annoying, and this song was just pestering me in a way that was annoying. And then it turns out in your book, one of the big things you do is you communicate with the souls on the other side. And so, I guess just pray about it. If you're supposed to give me a longer reading than this universe, as you call it, or God, as I would call it, or your spirit guides and the angels, all that, if it's something you're called to do, they will reward you. At this time, I can't pay you $35 for a 15-minute phone interview, but I thank you for the reading you did. I only get $90 a month, so that will have to go towards, a phone bill, and then a few other items. I have some shrines to the loving deceased people on the other side. They love it when I go there and burn incense and candles and put flowers there, and wonderful stuff. So I started to get visitations from the dead about March 3rd, 2015. I don't like to call them the dead because they have a sense of humor and they're fun and they smile and they're more alive than we are, but okay, so I got a feeling there was this girl with me. She was murdered in 1974, Denise Naslin, okay? And I didn't know what was going on, but, I just felt like she was very present, and all these coincidences started happening, and I felt like I could see her come into my cell, and there was a feeling of sweetness and euphoria and light, and I could see very clearly her place a rose on the ground. 2 days later, I remembered her mother's name had the word Rose in it. And then a book, Eleanor Roosevelt, shows up, and I'm reminded, oh yeah, her mother's name was Eleanor Rose. And so I began to pray these novenas, 9 days of prayer. All this grace started happening. I found the only piece of money I found was a 1974 penny. And 1974 was the year she was murdered. Okay, and the staff took the penny, and one of the songs, a song came, and it ends, "Restore my penny, little Denny, because it's worth a fortune to me. It dated back to 1974, an important time in history." And after I got out, I asked a guy, when's Richard Nixon impeached? He said 1974, so I sang the song, and right after singing "Restore my penny, little Denny," I walk in, there's a kid named Mohammed playing with pennies. He has a total of 4 pennies, okay? And he's like, maybe I have a 1974 penny. And sure enough, he restored the penny, and it led to a friendship with him that really disarmed my hatred for Islam. And then I find out Eleanor Rose is Lebanese, which means her ancestors, if you go back far enough, were related to Mohammed and Ishmael, Sarah, Abraham, descendants of them. And so it was clearly divine appointment. Anyway, I thought she was French because I would pray and I would see her with Napoleon, and I would see her with Joan of Arc and the French saints, and I'd see the nation of France, and I'd see French flags everywhere and the tiles on the wall and wherever. And so I called my dad. I was like, is Naslin French? He said, it's Swedish. And he says, you got Swedish on your mom's side. I said, no, I didn't know that. So that's interesting. Through this girl, I found out I've got Swedish. And the football team here happens to be the Vikings. The Swedes were Vikings. So now I have a favorite football team. So that's cool. Then I find out the significance of France, because the Swedes invaded northern France, conquered northern France, became the Normans, invaded Great Britain, conquered England in the Battle of Hastings, battle for the crown. And I was in Hastings jail, Hastings, Minnesota. Another coincidence. Then I got out of jail, and I'm in a Swedish neighborhood. I've got a Swedish roommate. We drive by, in the treatment center, a castle-looking building called the Swedish Institute. And so much interesting stuff. And so that's one of so many coincidences, okay? Like, I called the Swedes Yellow Jackets, the Swedish souls in heaven, because I'd pray to them and I'd see these soldiers, yellow uniform, black pants. I called them Yellow Jackets. So the first day I read about Sweden, we're held back from the jail facility. Somebody got stabbed, okay? And so we're held in this little room at the Bible study place, and I get to read about Sweden for the first time. I go back to the jail and I'm stung by a yellow jacket. Well, the thing is, I never saw a yellow jacket just randomly in that place the entire time. It just happened to sting me right after I read about Sweden, and then I come to find out from my dad, I called it the Feast of Sweden. So it was August 5th, so I decided on the 5th of each month I'll be devoted to King Eric the Ninth and the Swedish saints, okay? And so I call my dad. I said, who's the patron saint for August 5th? He said, Our Lady of the Snows. I always associated Sweden with snow before that, and I called them snowmen prior to that because most of Sweden's in the Arctic Circle, or some of it's in the Arctic Circle, so there are lots of snow, you would think. And so I just knew all these coincidences, the Yellow Jacket stinging, reading about Sweden, Feast of Our Lady of Snows, and I made it the Feast of Sweden before I found out it was Feast of Our Lady of the Snows. It was significant. There's no way all of these coincidences can be happening. And I come to find out Eleanor Rose is just this really devout lady, and she didn't get the remains of her daughter back. Her daughter was murdered performing an act of kindness for a man who was pretending to be injured, and the remains never got back, and her mother started a shrine and was just so brokenhearted, and she had an empty casket burial, and I just felt so bad seeing her mother weep, and her mother's passed away now, but I felt like her mother wanted me to continue her tradition. Like, it just crushed her. Her mother had suicide attempts. She never came to terms. She never changed Denise's room after Denise died, made a shrine in her honor, and I thought, she was telling me I should make a shrine in honor of Denise Naslin and in honor of some of the other victims who didn't have a burial, because according to Eleanor Rose's faith, it's really bad to desecrate a corpse and not lay it to rest. And I mean, that girl was the world to her. She said that. That girl meant everything to her. So her whole life was just in agony, and I just wanted to try to make as much beauty come out of this as I possibly could. And I'm so happy. I've received so many signs that they're reunited, and it just makes me so happy. And but it's just, I don't know what to make of a lot of this, because when God speaks to me, it's so often, and when the Spirit speaks to me, it's through coincidence, it's through lots of symbols, it's through signs, it's through dreams that just don't make sense. I see a lot of animals, and like, she would come to me as a hawk or a sparrow sometimes. And so, like, I would see a hawk when I'd pray to her, to be devoted to her, and then shortly after that, the pastor gave a sermon, and he talked about Genghis Khan's hawk that was trained knocking the water he was filling up out of his hand before he could drink it, so he slew the hawk. Turns out there's a poisonous snake in the water, and the hawk was trying to save his life, and this guy was telling me how many of us have had a hawk trying to, in our life, telling us something was wrong, and we kept pushing the hawk out of our life or whatever, and it totally made sense to me, because she's telling me all these things I was doing, drugs, alcohol, pornography, are very, very bad for me, and it leads to those crimes, like what happened to her. And when I was making the shrine to her right off the bat, it was to her and another girl killed by the same person, whose last name is Hawkins. The last name Hawkins is for those who had practiced falconry, the training of hawks and stuff. So that was interesting. I was hauling the rocks and flowers to the shrine, first shrine I ever made to anyone, and there's two hawks right there. One flew right behind me, was chirping. I kept walking. There was another hawk standing on the tree looking right at me. First time I ever saw the face of a hawk. What are the odds of that? I'm making a shrine to a girl named Hawkins and to Denise, who I identified already as a hawk. It's just interesting. And then, interesting things, like I never believed in these deities like Woden and Thor, and there was this guy that came to our sober house and where I'm living, and he was devoted to Woden and Thor. Well, on Thursday, something led to me first researching Woden and Thor, and I had caught a crow, made a YouTube with it. I had caught a crow at a bus stop on Wednesday, and I found out Wednesday comes from Woden's day, and he's the raven god. And I found this out on Thursday, which is Thor's day. And the man who taught me about Woden and Thor, that's responsible for me looking this stuff up, he's on ABC News for being the first at a scene to a kid who's hit by a car whose skull is split open. He's the first one there to put pressure on his skull. No way that's a coincidence. And it seems like Woden and Thor, and they're Swedish gods too. Scandinavian Viking gods, Swedish gods. So that's kind of linked to Denise as well. So, so much, but I understand. I thank you for the reading. Just pray. I bless your heart if you've actually watched this whole video, and if you get something, some message from me, I know that's the universe, God, the angels, the spirit guides, Denise Naslund, Eleanor Rose. They will certainly reward you, because I receive a lot of messages, but I'm skeptic, and I don't know which ones are from them, which are from my imagination. But what's a lot worse is I don't know if, even when I know they're speaking to me, I don't know if I'm hearing it the right way, or if I'm misinterpreting it, or if I'm getting excited and my imagination then runs wild. So I know they're speaking to me, but I don't know if I'm taking the excitement, all that positive energy from their presence, and I'm turning it into something it's really not. And I just feel there's something very important here. I'm ready to dedicate my life to the spirit people on the other side, but I've also got mental and emotional problems and so many other things, a history of drug addiction, jail, so I'm a very